and got offered a contract by Nike. And then Malcolm Arnold called me up and was like, I want to work with you. What Malcolm taught me how to do was work hard. Malcolm is a brute of a coach, to be frank. Like, you will outwork everyone. You will lift heavier. You will run longer and faster. And if you survive it, you're going to be better. But that's the problem, right? You got to survive
and you
it.
survive it.
I ran a personal best. It put me 6th in the world. I beat the reigning Olympic champion, and I was like 0.02 of a second off everyone else, like 3 people ahead of me. And I remember the last place on earth I wanted to be was those Olympics when I was warming up for that semi-final. I just didn't want to be there. I was so full of fear about not living up to my narrative, my expectations, my destiny, that I just wanted to run away.
Welcome to Limitless Minds, the podcast where curiosity meets greatness. Each week, co-hosts DJ Eitzen and Harry Wilson sit down with some of the most exceptional individuals across sports, business, and beyond. From world-class athletes and peak performance coaches to visionary CEOs, entrepreneurs, and influential authors, they dive deep into the stories and strategies that drive extraordinary success. If you're ready to discover what it takes to be truly limitless and push beyond your own limits, you're in the right place.
On today's Limitless Minds podcast, we have Jack Green, a double Olympian and 400-meter hurdler in the 2012 and 2016 Olympics, who transformed his personal battle with depression into a mission for change. Now a leading mental health advocate, he has influenced policies in elite sports, championed athlete well-being, and led corporate well-being initiatives. As a coach and keynote speaker, Jack inspires audiences on resilience, mental fitness, and peak performance. Enjoy. It seems like, kind of wrapped your identity around the result, the would be or the hopeful result of, winning gold, certainly medaling, you know what I mean? And then, and it didn't go that way. So then now the race is over. And the Olympics are over, and you've watched other people take the podium, like that the weight of that had to be pretty heavy, especially as it sunk in, right? In depression or however you want to identify that. How did you navigate kind of mentally, the post kind of mortem of that event, and where did that take you over the next couple of years?
Yeah, so there was a bit more with the Olympics where we had the 4x400 meter relay, and I'd never been in a senior relay before, right? And I was given that opportunity to run in the heats, and I was told if you run fast, you can run the final, basically. Like, this is your chance. And I ran probably the best race I've ever run in my life in those heats. I was phenomenal. And we qualified in bronze position. I thought, brilliant. It's kind of like going to fix everything for me here because I'm going to get a medal in some way. And then we went into that final and we finished 4th. We missed a medal by 0.13 of a second. I ran really well. I can't fault myself on that. It's just how it happened. But that felt like lightning striking twice for me as that young person, that I didn't understand life in a bigger way and just kind of saw it as like I'm being kicked when I'm down. Like, instead of I just came 4th in the Olympics and I really performed well. But yeah, so what happens with sport, with the Olympics as well, it's really weird. You go into a holding camp beforehand for like a month and you're looked after and you're the most important person and so on and so forth. The games, obviously the same thing. And then literally I got on a train the day after the Olympics and it took me 45 minutes to go home. And then I've just left the Olympics and I'm done, right? And you're just back to reality. And there's no support. There will be now. There's lots of talk about that kind of like decompression, the same with like the military and bringing that in. But I just went from this very top emotional moment, and it's emotional whether you do well or poorly, right? Because it's either a positive emotion or it's a negative. It's emotional regardless. But then I just went home, and then you get a month off. End of the season, you've got a month off, so you just go out and try and be as normal a person as possible, and sometimes overdo it because you're making up for the fact that you haven't been out socializing, drinking, whatever that might be, right? But what I then found hard, talking about the identity piece, was people would then recognize me when I was out, but they'd recognize me as the guy that fell in the hurdles. And that was hard because I was just like, I've just gone to the Olympics at 20 years old, and I'm one of the best athletes in the world, But what I'm known for is falling over a hurdle, which only reinforced this kind of like, I'm a loser, I'm a failure kind of thinking that I had. And yeah, it was an interesting post then Olympics. I went back into training a month later, but I was in such a bad place mentally. But I didn't believe mental health existed as such in terms of negative mental health. I thought it was an excuse for people that weren't as good as me or not capable of great things or people that just can't handle it, right? Will just have this excuse for mental health because I never experienced it. But I was really just not performing, not happy, both on the track and off the track. And after about 9 months, I tried to compete that following season. And I went to Doha in Qatar and I couldn't even finish the race. And I just broke down, kind of like crying, right? And just like, I need help. Because at that point, I remember saying to my coach, I was like, I'm living my dream, but I don't even want to live. Like, I don't know what's going on. And yeah, then shortly after that, I was diagnosed with depression, bipolar tendencies, generalized anxiety disorder. And then, yeah, I was considered a threat to my own life. And I just turned 21, was top 10 in the world, was voted the most talented sports person in Britain by one of the national newspapers. And yeah, at that point, I didn't want to live. And what people can get wrong sometimes is think that because I didn't perform at the Olympics how I wanted to is why then I struggled. But I can tell you now, with better awareness and education around mental health, I really struggled when I was a kid, particularly with anxiety and that perfectionism side of things. But then when you go to a situation like the Olympics, in my case, that was just a massive trigger moment that just set everything off to be to the point that falling off a cliff rather than, the gradual decline of my mental health, which would have been inevitable with the way that I was working and thinking and not looking after myself. But yeah, so it was pretty big fallout from being one of the best athletes in the world and the next big thing to I ended up taking 18 months out of the sport at that point, not competing at all.
Yeah, that was in 2013. You took some time, right? Yeah. Well, dude, what I love about you is your honesty. You know what I mean, and like how the clarity that you have. Obviously years gone by. That clarity I really admire. You know what I mean? Because as somebody who's obviously played sports at a high level, but also has family that has played at a much higher level. I'm like I always say, I'm like the Cooper Manning of the Wilson family, right? I'm like the other brother that has done some stuff, but like hasn't really done stuff compared to like my siblings, right? And I enjoy that position, right? I've loved watching them and being a part of their careers, and it's also painful, like to be like an observer of that, right? And I can imagine if I was your sibling in 2011, 2012, 2013, like being around, like that journey would be would be just almost just as tough, in a different way. Cause I know for me, like I'm always carrying the weight of their experiences in a different way, because I have no control over the result, of course, right? No control over the behaviors that kind of take them through that result. All I can do is just like support and support and support and support. And I've always talked about like writing a book one day of on being like the family member of the best in the world, right? Because it's its own journey, and there are mental health components to it. I mean, I began at some point, seeing a psychologist and getting therapy and stuff like that, largely because of that journey and the observation kind of room, if you will, that I was in. And so that's another podcast for another day, I think. But so let's talk a little bit about so some of the lessons from this, right? And because I really want the audience to kind of, certainly leave with some tools, leave with a little toolkit, some things that maybe that, Jack Green has used, whether it be, while competing, post competing, et cetera, and just kind of the mental fitness component. Because I think one of the things about mental health is that for a lot of people, it just seems inaccessible, even though we've come so far. You mentioned that you kind of were initially at a point where you didn't really believe that was a thing, right? Certainly something that you could like work on, some of the tools that you could have, then also, that there was resources for. And so even people today, like, a lot of it's kind of unaccessible, or, hey, like, what's the difference between like a clinical thing versus just kind of the fitness component of like, making it part of my daily hygiene. Right. And so one thing I'd love to learn from you is just some of the strategies, right? Some of the mental fitness strategies, techniques, that you used, particularly when you were performing under pressure, whether it be in sport or even post, like what are some of the things that you're using as part of your daily hygiene in this area?
Yeah, and I think this is the most important thing when we look at books, podcasts, speakers. I've been a keynote speaker for years and years, and there's so many people on the circuit that literally just go, well, here's my story, and walk off. And you're like, well, your story's cool, but I'm here to learn something. Like, give me something I can either apply to myself or to others. So I think these practical takeaways are the biggest thing. And what I talk about here is kind of like mindset is your greatest investment, right? Because I'm retired now. I've been retired 5 years from the sport. Retired early, but retired 5 years. I'm physically not the athlete I once was, right? That's gone, and I'm cool with that. Well, I'm not cool with that, but that's but it happens, right? Whereas mindset-wise, I still got all those tools, all that learning that I was fortunate enough to have when I ended up at IMG Academy, where obviously that's kind of my link with Limitless Minds, because I ended up at IMG Academy when I returned to the sport, moved to Florida and restarted my career and worked with mental conditioning coaches there, and didn't quite have the crossover with Trevor, but obviously Trevor was well spoken about there and such a big character. So I knew of Trevor. But a lot of the lessons were his lessons or his colleagues' lessons, and then just experience as well as I coach athletes. I've coached athletes to the Olympics, Olympic finals, world titles, and what you learn from them and other people, and lots of it applies across the board, right? So the same mindset I have in sport, I can apply in my day to day. Actually, the biggest challenge where I've had to use these mindset tricks has been becoming a dad. By far. By far. I thought I was really good mindset-wise. I thought I was really neutral, and I thought I was, I can manage things. I can't. Not at all. I've been challenged, and I've got a lot to learn. But
how old is your kid?
She's just 18 months last week.
She's 18 months. That's awesome.
We're in we've started meltdowns, which is great fun. But she is really, really good fun now outside. Whereas I found as a dad, and lots of my friends have said, I found the first year really tough as a dad, and mindset-wise found it really hard as well. But in terms of lessons, right? So the first one was I measured myself solely on results, and my identity was attached to that, something we talked about a lot. And I just had to shift to being like, well, what's a measure of success for me? One that is sustainable. And that was measuring myself on effort rather than results. So being able to ask myself at the end of the day, like, did I give 100% of what I had on the day? Because that understood I was a human being, understood that I might not have slept well, or I might have financial stress, or whatever it might be. I've only got 40% in the tank. Can I give everything that I've got today? Whereas I used to live in the world of results, which meant that on a day I only had 40%, I was going into my reserves. But I was doing that every day, and then I wouldn't recover, and then I'd burn out or break. Instead of what I learned working with some of the best athletes that have ever lived, world record holders, Olympic champions, they were just really consistent in showing up and then having the intention of how do I just get everything I can from today so that I can do it again tomorrow and the next day and the next day. Whereas I didn't work that way. I was literally just like, almost like living for today in a negative way of like, right, well, I've got to get everything possible, that every bit of potential out of me right now, rather than like understand that sustainable piece. So being able to measure myself on effort rather than results has been such a big change, and has allowed me just to keep going, something I've never been able to do before because I would just burn out. So that's one. I think challenge or threats are really interesting concept. I know it's talked about a lot, and I'll be repeating things because we're very aligned. Limitless, right? Challenge or threat, and it's, well, how do I view a situation? So if you go back to London 2012 with me, I saw an Olympic semi-final as a threat to my identity, my existence, to me, right? When actually, if I was able to switch that, instead of seeing it as a threat and going into that kind of like fight, flight, freeze, that very emotional response where anything good that happens there is a bit of luck, right? It's not repeatable. It's happening and you don't really know why. If I could have switched into that moment to be like, I'm just being challenged here to see what I'm capable of, to see if the work that I've done now, what I can get from that, to see where I can learn and develop and grow so that next time when that opportunity comes, I'm more ready for it, right?
Yeah.
But I couldn't do that. I wasn't able to switch. So that C or T, challenge or threat, which I actually learned when I was in Florida at IMG Academy. I did a TEDx talk there alongside a Navy SEAL who talked about this, how they view conflict. And I was just like, there was a light bulb just went, why haven't I been taught this sooner? And I applied it in life. It might be a keynote, a podcast. It might be an interview or whatever it might be. And just go, am I really being threatened here? And 99.9% of the time in the life that I live anyway, I'm not being threatened. There's no real threat to me. Yeah, there might be a bloody nose of my ego, but that's about it, right? Nothing that's going to be that damaging. So if I can start to see it like a game, challenge, since I say challenge, I just feel my shoulders drop, right? I just think, oh, right, let's go and just see what we're capable of doing. That for me has been a huge game changer. And then I've got so many more that I talk about, and so countless more. But I think effort over results is a really important one I use with my athletes a lot to try and keep them in the game. But challenge or threat, especially when we get to time trials or competition.
Yeah, I love that.
I was going to say, I think Josh Lifrak, he calls it victim or victor. Kind of along the same lines. Do you think I keep thinking about your daughter now? Do you think you'll encourage her to run track? What's your thoughts around? I know it's really early, obviously. She's on
the track already.
She's fast, DJ.
That's right. I know, man.
It didn't take her long. She's zooming already.
She's already doing hurdles, they got her jumping up with shoes.
Crawling.
In all fairness, we just started. She likes jumping at the moment, though she can't jump.
That's right.
She's practicing. But she's got a good coach. So we're like, bend the knees and throw the arms. And they're very malleable at this age. But no, in reality, sport has given me so much. I wouldn't be on this podcast. I wouldn't have the opportunities I have to help people without sport. But sport is also brutal. Sport is not healthy, not elite sport. So recreational, community sport, yeah, cool. Elite sport is not healthy. And it's never going to be, and we don't want it to be. That's not the point. But can we do it in a healthier way? So if my partner is very tall and athletic, I'm obviously fed my daughter most likely is physically going to be capable of being a good sports person in whatever sport that she likes. I'm never going to coach her. I will never push her into it, but I will make sure that the environment and the people in her environment are doing the right stuff that means that she is looking at it from a sustainable point of view, whether she knows that or not, right? But we'll be looking at mindset and having patience to know that a career can be long, not that you need to win tomorrow. But also the same way, when I coach young people, and I mean kids in this, I don't use a stopwatch.
Yeah.
Which track and field is all about time, right? But I don't, because with a 12-year-old, if I say, right, let's run 100 meters and I time it, and I go, oh, well, you ran 19 seconds. The only important thing at that point is the time.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know how they did it. They don't know what they could do better. They didn't know how it felt. So then we lose all learning, because the next time that 12-year-old goes and runs, they just go, what was the time? Was it quicker? Instead of, well, how do I make it quicker?
Yeah.
So this is the kind of way I think and will behave with my daughter. It's like, what's the important thing here? What is success? If you want to go down that route, let's make sure success is something that is positive and healthy and also realistic at the same time, right? And that I will support you and I will love you whether you win an Olympics or not. And I know that's standard for everyone, but the reality is I will love my daughter regardless. Yes, I will be incredibly proud, and it will be incredible if she was Olympic champion, but it's not going to change how I feel about her. And if she can understand that, then hopefully we get the right reasons for doing it, which means
Harry, I got to ask a question. This is not about track. This is about music. All right. So, and Harry, you may know where I'm going with this. Jack, who's your favorite musical artist? Because Harry knows who mine is.
It changes all the time. But I'm like stuck in the
Okay.
early
Okay.
2000s, like indie rock, right? So I'm a Red Hot Chilies man. I'm a Killers, that kind of thing. But I do listen to anything and everything. If you looked at my Spotify, you'd be like, where is this going? Well,
No, yeah,
actually,
right
that's a
now,
lie.
right?
You'd
That's
mainly
right.
see nursery
Well,
rhymes on there at the
Harry
moment.
knows.
But like my most
Yeah, right.
listened
That's
to is just like Bar Bar Black Sheep. And you're like, what has
so
happened
no. Harry knows.
to me this year? Yeah.
I had a crush on Amy Winehouse, man, and so yeah, like I really respect her music. I don't know if you were a fan or not, but I know she's right there. She was right there in your backyard.
Well,
Yeah, she did.
Amy had her own challenges out there,
Yes,
man. Amy was, lived a rough one.
man.
She made some great music, but she lived a rough one.
Yeah, and it's same for any elite performer,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And you can be elite in anything, but are we doing it in the right way?
Mm,
Are we doing it for the right reasons? And I think we've glorified so much that it's got to be a struggle. It's got to be hard. You've got to make sacrifices, which I hate the word sacrifice because I just made a choice to do everything I did, right? I didn't sacrifice anything. I just chose a different path because you can't do everything. But we've glorified so much how you should be,
yeah.
which isn't always the right way or the right way for you. Which is why I like going down this route of like, is there a better way to win?
Yeah. No, that's
Um,
that's really
yeah.
insightful
So
because you're
I
right. I
just
mean,
think
you
that's
talk
so
about,
important.
well, elite athletes, elite performers, whether it's music, business, sports, that pressure, the illusion of choice, like you said, you don't really have a lot of choices if you want to be great, and but that it does come with a tremendous amount of pressure, and there are a lot of obstacles, and I think you've done a really nice job of showing both sides, right? The success part of it, but also the real challenges that you have to navigate through in order to have that kind of success. So it's yeah, very, very helpful.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. I've been in workplace wellbeing for the last 3 years. I was head of wellbeing at BBC, and I've ended up going into that side of things. And wellbeing seems quite soft, but I'm different. I don't look at wellbeing as soft. I see it as the foundation of high performance. Right? If you look after yourself, if you're thriving personally, you're more likely to thrive professionally. Surely that makes sense. But I'm really big on like, there's a cost to performance. There's a cost to success. Just make sure that you're willing to pay it and that you're doing it for the right reasons. I'm not saying that it's ever going to be easy or it's ever going to be nice. There will be easier moments, there'll be nicer moments, and so on. But if you want to get anywhere, you're going to have some difficulty or some adversity at some point. That's life. So let's not avoid that, but let's just make sure that we're willing to go through that difficult time because I've got the right reason for doing it. And I think that's where we really struggle is we never really ask people why they do things. We just say, you're great at this, go do it. Instead of like, well, do you want to do it and why do you want to do it? Because that's the thing that's going to keep you going, not the fact that you can, right? I can do a lot of things. Doesn't mean I want to do them all.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think this is a good kind of place to transition to to post competing, at least in sports, realm of your life. You retired around, I think, 2019, right? And now you're doing a lot of work in the well-being space. You've been an entrepreneur. You founded some companies. I think you've been a part of exiting, being a part of some exits in some organizations that you've been around and built. You're the founder of Olywell. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, Olywell is a consultancy, and then I've got Taser. I love acronyms, clearly, but all focused on sport and well-being essentially, and helping people be their best on the track or off the track.
Yeah, I love it. And one of the terms that we use, and I think this is something that you've probably run across in your time at IMG and so on and so forth, is just that corporate athlete kind of verbiage, right? That's what at Limitless Minds, that's what we're training. We just left. We just recently left a company down in Austin, Texas, and had 5 or 6 of our coaches in the building, and really just the beginning of our relationship with them. And we were in front of maybe the definition of corporate athletes, people that are constantly competing with themselves, with their peers, in a healthy way, certainly with the market and trying to take market share, but they're always being measured on behavioral metrics at work, certainly measured on the results when it comes down to it. But the thing that they share, as well as some of the things we're talking about as far as athletes, is that there's a really fine line between, following kind of the behavior and the process versus the results, like effort, right? Effort over results, right? For example. And I think that challenge over threat is something that I'd love to just package up and take back to them as well, right? Because we probably touch on some of those things, but the COT language is really, really, really great. But like, what types of lessons, should people be taken from a journey like yours, right, as an Olympic athlete, and bring into their corporate athlete landscape?
I think firstly, understanding that performance is for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So like, you don't have to be an elite athlete to be a elite or high performer. So performance is for, as long as you're trying, you're a performer. That's number one. Then the fact that piece I said, you've got to thrive personally, thrive professionally, because you are a human being 24 hours a day, and you are an athlete or an employee for just a part of that. Yet we put so much focus on the smaller part of us, and then wonder why things just don't go well when the rest of our life is crumbling, right? So for me, it's that bigger understanding of, well, who am I, and how does that influence me as a performer, as a professional, and can I get all of that in order so I have as little distraction and as much clarity as possible when I get to game day? And game day can be in the workplace, right? Whatever it might be. That for me is the reason why we focus on well-being and looking after ourselves and getting the foundation, is so that when it's time for me to perform, that's all I have to focus on. I'm not worrying about X, Y, and Z and all these other things going on, or I don't have the capacity to give anything because I'm not sleeping, I'm not eating well, whatever it might be. All the basic stuff, because that's the other thing with well-being. It's really basic. That's not sexy, it's not fun, but the reality is it's basic. A bit like sport, do the same thing, keep doing it. It's really boring, but repetition, great. So that would be a big thing for me, is understanding that human element and how much the human element actually drives and is the pilot of the rest of your life. And also more is always more. It's not always better. Something I have to talk a lot with in the workplace, because our main measure is time. How much time have you put into this? How much time? I don't care about time. I just want the quality, right? Because we can keep doing more, but is more going to get us more results, or is it just going to get us more fatigue, more error? So a lot of this is just awareness of like, why do we do what we do? That question, right? Like just going in and just being like, why do you do that? If they can answer it, great. I used to say with coaches, part of my learning as an athlete, I used to say with coaches, like, if you can't tell me why I'm doing it, I'm not going to do it. Because if you don't understand it, I'm not going to waste my time, because I've only got so much time and I need to put it in the right places.
I was just going to say, I mean, like, I think, unpacking that, you mentioned like doing simple better, do simple better. Sometimes it's not just, working an extra, 80 hours a week or whatever it is and just doing things, but how do you do the simple things, at an elite level, do them better, and not overcomplicate things. And we see the corporate athlete do that all the time. They will wear themselves down, and or just get stuck and not do anything. We see that too. But sometimes there's beauty in the simplicity, and I think that's the IMG Academy. You mentioned that earlier. They do a really nice job at teaching the athletes, that concept. And it sounds like you're doing the same thing with your teams and athletes too, as well.
Make the main thing the main thing.
Yep.
Or what are you good at? Do that. That's why you're here. You're here because you're good at something. You're not here because you're bad at something. So let's lean into that. But it is hard in corporate environments, because if your measure is revenue and it's coming around to that time of year, or there's stress to deliver, that's the only focus then, right? Because the main thing for the business is revenue. But actually, if we can start to change some of our success metrics to be around our people. So when I was at BBC, we did a simple thing that I changed there, which was when we went into a senior executive meeting, the first question that was asked was, how are your people? It might sound really simple and stupid, but it made such a difference, because by asking the main leaders of each function, how are your people, it forced them to go and find out. And when they went and asked the question, how are your people, to then the people who worked under them, and so on and so on, we ended up finding out a load of stuff, good and bad, that we needed to address. or praise and say, isn't that great? Let's do more of it. But because the measure was never around people, other than like, are people staying? Are they going? Or that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Or once a year, just being like, are you happy working here? Yes or no, or out of 10. We actually got to this point where not only was it at the front of all of our senior executive meetings, but it was forcing people to go and actually have conversations, whether they wanted to or not. We ended up just finding out a load of information that meant we could look after people, which then drove the main things we were looking for of revenue and various other metrics.
And that's so powerful. I mean, DJ makes me even want to kind of steal some of that energy.
Right.
We're talking to our clients, decision makers, of course, head of sales, HR, whatever it might be. That question of how are your people? Because
how are your people?
I think if you ask me that, and we have a small organization, I would probably want to jump into an answer and then have to be like, wait, how are
Let
my
me
people?
check.
And then depending on the response, it's like, because for many, if they're honest, their answer is probably gonna be like, I don't know. You know what I mean? I'm probably making assumptions based on observation, or maybe we did a survey, or whatever. But the reality is that, like, without some real data to support how are your people, you don't really know. And if without the data and without the answer, you're probably not providing any solutions for them to put them in a space of optimization. And so
great.
Here we are. Hey, Limitless Minds, we're here,
Right.
So I think that's the thing. So we're gonna talk about that after this call. But as we close, I want to make sure that people know where to find you and what you're up to, because you mentioned Taser. I'd love to explain to people what Taser is, because you founded that this past summer, right? 2024. June.
Yeah, recently, and to be honest, it's very early, and I don't think sport's ready for it, and I will explain what it is, because I think we still have a long way to go, but I want to be visible and be the person kind of championing this side of things. So essentially, Taser is the athlete sustainability report. I think we're so obsessed with data within sport in particular, but we don't really know what's happening outside of the sport itself. So I can tell you every metric, right, of the performance on field, but we don't really know what's happening off it. So we have validated assessments. They're all sure, all anonymous, on anything off track or off field, off court. So that might be mental health, it might be financial well-being, it might be opinion on culture and leadership, the interpersonal relationships. And then we can give all that anonymous data we collect to the club and say, right, we can see what's happening here. We can see 70% of your squad, so without revealing anyone, so we're making sure we're protecting people, are saying that poor financial well-being is impacting their performance or causing high stress. So then we know, right, let's go and target this. As I said, it's early days, loads of interest and so on. As I think sport's still a little bit behind in appreciating the importance of this, but that will come as our young people come through who have so much more expectation of how they should be treated and what well-being and health and well-being is now. So I think there's going to be a shift. But yeah, so I do that. And if you ever want to find me, I'm pretty much just on LinkedIn, because I try and reduce the amount of social media time I have. And
I've kind of gotten to that point too, Jack. I mean, so like I'm actively on LinkedIn, like I'm behind the screens. I still have like my Instagram profile, etc. But it's no longer on my phone, so our friend and guy Dane is the one that's usually posting on that particular platform. I post on LinkedIn. I do all the LinkedIn stuff, but I've been taking a hiatus from the gram for now. I'll probably go back, I'm sure, but my account still exists, but I've taken a little hiatus myself, so I respect that, man. I respect that. Well, listen, brother, this is just a great conversation, man. We got to have you back on. We got to do like we might even have to have you on sooner than later, and just maybe even talk about some really specific things. So I'm excited about following what you're doing, learning more about Taser, how we can help you. You know what I mean? But I think that this was a special one today, in my opinion. So I appreciate you, man.
Heck yeah. I like hanging out with Olympians, man. It's a good look. It's a good look, man. It's
better, man. Makes you better. Well, listen, for the listeners, another Limitless Minds podcast done and dusted. And remember, you don't have to be sick to get better.